My name is Jessica Black, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work. I thought we could spend some time today to talk about the importance of taking care of ourselves when we're taking care of others. During the best of circumstances, it can feel like a real stretch to be able to focus on ourselves and all of those who depend on us. Again, whether it's our children, our parents, or really just anybody in our social network for whom we feel a level of responsibility. But in these really challenging times, it can feel even more trying to do so. I think, therefore, we could spend some time today to talk about first the true barriers and bottlenecks to providing ourselves with time for self-care. And I think the second, where I'll spend more of our time, is really focused on being able to create key opportunities and pathways to upgrade our level of self-care. To start, let's begin by thinking about various excuses that we give ourselves, or perhaps reasons for not taking care of ourselves in a consistent way. I think sometimes those excuses make sense. They're valid. They go with the circumstances. But I would imagine that you would agree that in sometimes a level of 10 doesn't need to be ascribed to somebody else's need. In fact, a 10 might need to be described as meeting your needs instead. So let's pay attention to the excuses and think about the narrative that we've created around the importance of taking care of others and putting ourselves aside. Again, some of those may be valid, but there may be space even in those excuses to create some time for ourselves. And as we'll talk about when it comes to opportunities to build in self-care, that doesn't mean we need to take care of ourselves alone. We can do it with the support of others. Sometimes what adds to the narrative of I don't have time for self-care or somebody needs me more than I need myself is that we're perfectionists. We want to be able to do so much and do it in such a specific, almost perfect, if not perfect way, that we spend a lot of time on others and less on ourselves. It may be that we feel a level of guilt, and guilt is not a good feeling. Any negative affect can feel really challenging to our social brains. And so we'll do what we can to say yes or to have a hard time limit setting with others. And yet we then set limits on ourselves to say no, not right now for ourselves. So clearly we can do it. We just need to be able to focus on where to say no in our lives so that we can really say yes to ourselves. Again, it can be in the micro moments. It doesn't necessarily mean a drastic change. It may also be that we're more unforgiving with ourselves than we are with others. So again, as you're going through really thinking about how do I upgrade a level of self-care, I think it's to notice the thoughts that we have, to really pay attention to them and think, have I created a story around this to continue to support this behavior? Is there a way that I can break in and create a new narrative to free up some time for myself? Which moves us to really thinking then about key opportunities to create time for self-care. I think it's first important to take time to make the decision to change. And again, it doesn't need to be a drastic change. It can be something that may feel small, but realize that any change your brain is trying to make is actually large. You need to be able to create new neural pathways, a new thought pattern, and that takes time. So again, be forgiving with yourself, even as you're making a decision to change, because that's a really important part of the process. The next piece to think about too are setting goals for the change. Again, you're not changing everything about yourself, a particular behavior, a particular way of thinking, way that you spend 10 minutes in the morning, for example. So once you set that goal, be able to give yourself feedback. Take the time to do so. Maybe that means journaling. Maybe that means sharing your progress with a loved one. Again, make note of the steps that you're taking. Give yourself credit for doing so. You would do that for others. And I think after really being able to give yourself that feedback as you're making progress to goals and recognizing all of the different micro changes you're making to be able to get there, is to take time for pleasure, to really, take a bit of time to think about, what do you enjoy doing? The brain really does well when it's able to have a little fun. I study humor, and I know firsthand the importance of even a few moments of laughter. It matters a lot because something like humor and positive affect opens up networks in the brain that actually help us to focus better. They help us to be more creative and create interesting ways of solving difficult problems. So again, being able to make the decision to change a behavior or behaviors, setting a goal and tracking your progress, just as you would do your work. Being able to take time for pleasure and thinking through, is that pleasure something that's actually giving back to me? Or is it actually in some way interfering with my ability to upgrade my level of self-care? And I would say finally, even in your social relationships, think about ways that you can integrate self-care into them, as opposed to having it separate. The more naturally we're able to integrate this level of care in our own lives, it means it'll just be easier to do so. We can create a pattern. In fact, personally, I realized that in this sort of go, go, go world, that I wasn't in a space of consistently modeling for those in my social network what it meant to care for the self. And I realized in studying the brain that because we have social brains, we pick up on the modeling of others. Whether we're saying something or not, the behaviors that we're exhibiting are being picked up in sometimes pretty intentional ways from our children, from those who depend on us. And so being able to take time, whether it's enjoying a puzzle, doing some artwork, being able to just sit and reflect on stories in your family. You can do that with others. And I think it will help them and inspire them to take on a level of self-care that's really important for our brains and our bodies. I hope this has been helpful to you. And remember, you're worth the upgrade.